Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome to the My Broadband Cloud Conference 2021 and none other than OpenText and none other than Thabiso Hlatshwayo, who's the Solutions Consulting Manager for Africa at OpenText. No stranger to My Broadband. Thabiso, really good to chat to you again. We chatted a few months ago and it's been such an interesting time for all of us since the pandemic has started. I guess it's shifted so many things. Now, OpenText is a returning sponsor to the My Broadband Cloud Conference, so great to have you guys here again. Now, for those delegates who are not familiar with OpenText, please tell us exactly who OpenText is. Give us that elevator pitch, Thabiso.
Gladly, Aki. And yes, thank you so much. It's lovely to be back here on my broadband. We enjoy it at OpenText to be part of this engagement. So, Aki, if I was to meet someone on the street and they ask me what does OpenText do, or who is OpenText for that matter, I'd probably start by saying we are a global company, probably one that you haven't heard of, that is quite a leader in the space of technology. And we are an information management company. We specialize in content management, digital experience, and we help companies digitize the supply chain. One of the most recent sayings that I've heard around digitizing supply chains is we are literally the post office that's in the sky. And as OpenText, we work with many organizations with industries such as the government, manufacturing, financial services industries, oil and gas, and many more of different sizes. We've got our headquarters in Johannesburg. These are headquarters for Africa, anyways, in Johannesburg. And one other thing that I'd say is historically, we've been an on-premise based organization. All our offerings have been on-premise, but in the past 5 to 10 years, we've invested a lot of effort, knowledge, and time in moving everything that we offer on-premise to be available on the cloud as well. That's OpenText in a nutshell.
Well, pretty exciting. So, at a very simplistic level, you really help businesses manage their content, and it's a natural progression in my mind. It's to move that content to the cloud. Is this something that's actually happening right now, and is it an all or nothing approach? Are companies taking this cloud adoption seriously, Thabiso?
Okay, that's a good question. And the answer to it is happening. We've seen large organizations, giants in Africa and South Africa that have already adopted the cloud first strategy, the banks, you name them. So it's happening, absolutely. And it's not the all or nothing approach. Depending on the different levels of maturity, your plans strategically as organizations, we work with that, and we will adopt many options. One of the most common options is the hybrid approach, where you keep some of your offering on premise and you move some of your offering onto the cloud. This is really up to you. This is really up to us, I guess, if we're in partnership, you working with your service providers to decide what's the best approach that you can take. Yeah.
So I guess that hybrid approach, it seems to me that everyone, I mean, that's the biggest approach to the cloud. It seems to be going the hybrid way. I mean, what would you say are those compelling reasons for moving content to the cloud? Is it not a case, and you often hear this argument, listen, it's not broken, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Are you getting that kind of resistance from people?
Well, we do. We have these conversations a lot. It's a daily one for me, and there's many reasons that drive organizations to even look at the cloud approach. And probably the most common ones, in my view, maybe to start with a few, is to ensure business objectives are achieved. You know, if you need to maintain things and keep things running, you need to ensure that you've got a strong plan in place. Now, typically, if you are, let's say, for example, a manufacturing organization, you do clothes, shoes, you name it. That's what you do. That's your core business. Technology enables you to do that much better. But technology is not what you do. So typically, we help organizations by taking that away from them and making sure that it just works. They sleep better knowing that the experts are dealing with it and they're handling it for them. They're managing all of their content, secure, it's always on, always available, and backups are being done. This is what we do for organizations. We allow them to do what they do better. Secondly, on the list of reasons or things to consider whenever you want to go cloud, or not consider going to cloud for that matter, and you want to know why. Why you should be looking at going to cloud. If your idea is to improve agility as well as collaboration, then cloud is definitely your choice, because cloud by default means you're able to access your information, your content anywhere, anytime. You're able to collaborate with all of your stakeholders, partners, customers, and everybody else at any time. This is indeed some of the things that we saw when the pandemic hit. Those organizations that were ready for those conversations were quick and were able to adapt to the pandemic, and those that were not really struggled. And finally, I want to talk about innovation. If you want to innovate, at the core of innovation is flexibility. If you want to innovate, at the core of innovation is the ability for you to be up to date. And the cloud, if you think about it, allows you to really tap into all of those things to allow you to innovate a little bit more and be quicker in making quick decisions to drive your organization. Yep.
Well, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing from you, Thabiso, in a nutshell there, is it makes you a lot more competitive, right? And it gives you that flexibility and agility that you touched on. And the reality is, if you're not doing what you've just told us, your competitors are going to do it. And guess who's going to be more flexible and grow faster than you if you don't take this approach right now? So, I mean, when you look at the benefits of moving content to the cloud, they are very clear. But surely it's easier said than done. You know, I want to pause a bit on those challenges and the opportunities as well. And what would you say is keeping companies from moving their content to the cloud? And if there are concerns and barriers, are they actually valid?
Look, Aki, I would say there are valid concerns. If someone is saying, I'm really worried about the security as one of the reasons that they don't want to consider moving to cloud, because they fear moving to cloud, things are out of their control. It's no longer in their hands. Whereas if it's sitting somewhere in your data center that you have access to with your own keys, you just feel a lot more better around that. But here's an interesting fact. From a security perspective, those organizations who have moved to the cloud, who have conducted their own tests, who have seen how the systems work once everything is up, they report up to 70% improvement on their security.
Wow.
So these are facts. So I'd say it's a valid concern, but indeed, once you look closer into it, you find that it actually can be combated by moving to the cloud. The other reason that is quite common, and I hear this all the time, is the fact that, look, I've been working on the system of mine or my finance system for the past 15 to 20 years. I've made it work for my business. I don't want to change it. It's going to be too complicated to move it up there. So complexity. Look, if you look a little bit closer, you'll see that the world has been doing cloud. The world has been working on processes, and things are not as uncommon as you might think. Moving to the cloud gives you a chance to look at some of the best practices at that point in time, and you'll find that a lot of them can work 95% for your organization, and all you need to do is tweak, if at that, the remaining 5%, and the solution works. So complexity, we found that a lot of organizations who move up into the cloud, they've come that what they thought was complex actually is not that complicated.
Okay, and also I guess that it's actually probably made their lives a lot simpler moving to the cloud, because it's taken a lot of the complexities that you actually don't see in your business. The moment it's up in the cloud and it's automated in many ways, and you've got layers of AI and that sort of thing, it takes a lot of the complexity away. I heard someone talking about I don't know if this is a real thing. Migration paralysis. Is that a real thing in the cloud world? I mean, I'm not a techie like you are in the cloud space. I'm a tech journo, but I can only imagine that this can be a real thing, especially when we're talking about moving large, complex workloads and applications and content to the cloud. How companies overcome migration paralysis? I mean, is it a thing? Can you overcome migration paralysis?
It's a thing. Aki. It's real in the technology world. Anyone who has to go through a migration, they really have to be prepared. It can be crippling at times if you're really moving some complicated workloads. It's real, and we don't ignore this. And I think the common answer that comes to mind around this topic is you need to chew it one bite at a time. And in the context of cloud, really, I'm going to bring up the word hybrid again. Hybrid allows you to move at the pace that works for you as an organization. It allows you to move what you can at first as low-hanging fruit up into the cloud, and what is remaining, or indeed you can take some of the benefits that you're getting from that move and you can repollinate them back onto the on-prem offering, so you can start moving more and more workloads. That's the typical strategy that we've seen with some of the organizations. So I'd say the answer is definitely cloud, hybrid. Take the hybrid approach.
Migration paralysis. Who would have thought? I wonder who came up with that particular term there. Now, nobody said it's going to be easy. I mean, we're talking about real complex things over here. And based on your experience, what are some of those common pitfalls that companies should avoid on their cloud journeys? And there must be many there.
There is many, Aki. There's many pitfalls to consider whenever you want to start your journey to the cloud. One of them, I think you've touched on them already, the all or nothing approach. I really feel like organizations often feel pressured or feel the need to move everything into the cloud. This is actually one of the things that I'd say is not right. Try to look at what works for you as an organization. And like we said, start small and you can eat at it one bite at a time. That's probably the biggest thing, but I've got a few for you, Aki. Some of the things that I've seen occur quite a lot is when organizations evaluate costs,
Yes.
I'm involved in a lot of return on investment conversations around, but it works. I'm spending so much, going to the cloud might cost me more money. And I want to do this comparison. For those people who we've spent time together with, you find that when they were doing their own ROI studies, they neglect to consider some of the typical costs that they experience on premise, things like security, things like theft. These are real things that you typically will experience, someone breaking into your server rooms and stealing some cables, etc., and thus rendering you down for a while. They don't take some of those into account when doing their ROI analysis against on-prem and cloud. So I would say you need to ensure that you're doing a proper feasibility study around what's costing you on-premise and what it will cost you when you go to the cloud. And typically you'll find that you're actually saving a lot of money in the long run, and you sleep better knowing that it's being taken care of for you. Scoping and scope creep, that's another term for technology. Understanding exactly where you are and what it is you want to move into the cloud when you want to move it into the cloud is very critical. This is where sometimes organizations will short circuit that conversation, and it can have a dire effects on the on your journey to the cloud. Maybe just to share the last one with you, Akim, before I move off this point is, the conversations around, but I don't want my data to be outside of the country, and the data residency discussions.
Oh
It's
gosh,
a real
data sovereignty, eh? I mean,
data sovereignty.
you must hear that every day.
I hear that every day. And the fact is, you're seeing huge investments worldwide where data centers are spinning up in region, in country. In South Africa, we partner with AWS and Azure, and we're able to provide some of these services on premise, the services on or in Africa, in country, on AWS and Azure and some of those other hyperscalers. So it's possible to have an approach where you can understand what you need locally, and what you don't really care for can still run from any other data center, so long as you're getting the service that you need and it doesn't impact your business from a regulations perspective. Then let that go. A typical example of this is we're all using Microsoft from time to time. Some of the Microsoft services, a lot of their Microsoft services aren't running locally, yet we're not complaining about this. It works for us. We're not experiencing any challenges about this. So I think you really need to look at it from that perspective as an organization as well.
Okay, no, that's interesting. What I'm hearing from you as well is that, instead of taking a shotgun approach, rather target exactly what you want to achieve, small bite sizes, be targeted, be realistic with what you want to achieve with your journey. I mean, can you give me some of those real world examples? Maybe you've got two examples or as many as you like on how cloud is helping companies today. I mean, there are so many great examples of this. What have you seen?
Aki, I've got so many, and you touch on a question that's quite dear to me because we are solution consultants. We want to see real life solutions, make real life improvement on our customers' lives. A good example of this is think of a pre-COVID time. This is pre-COVID, and you're an organization. Let's assume you're doing HR. You're onboarding employees. If your processes were designed on an on-premise basis, that means you still rely on the employee coming into the office physically, bringing a file of documents with some of the documents, and you need to scan these in, you need to have them sign physically documents, etc.
Yes.
This, Aki, would have been an organization that would have struggled to transition when the pandemic hit, because suddenly you couldn't go to the office, you couldn't meet the individual, you couldn't sign documents, you couldn't scan documents. It was a big, big issue. Versus an organization that would have already been on the cloud at that point in time, that was already doing these things digitally, signing, using signing services, or digital signing services to sign documents. This interview that we're having now is a digital one. Imagine if you're interviewing someone digitally and they're able to upload and attach the documents as part of this conversation as we are talking now. This means that the next layer of this conversation as a hiring manager is to take this information and pass it over to the department that does criminal checks, etc. This is all done digitally and electronically. That company would have already been able to survive or maneuver the pandemic situation much better than the one that is running on-premise based processes. So this is a real live example that I think typically would be impacting many, many people today, just as an example of what cloud can bring for organizations.
It's so interesting you say that. As you were saying this, I'm thinking back to how many people I've met in the last few months, and we must remember this is now 18 months into the pandemic, that have actually been hired this way. So they've got employment during the lockdown, but they haven't even been into the physical premises of the company they work for. They haven't even met the colleagues that they work with online. They haven't even met their senior management, but they've been hired online, and this entire process of starting in a new workplace has all been done digitally. So it's quite extraordinary when you think about it. When you have everything in place, it's a great example that you use with HR. And there are probably thousands and thousands of people that have started new jobs during this lockdown period that actually haven't even felt the company culture, which I guess will come in time. Well, it's great advice there and a great example that you've just used. What tips would you give, Thabiso, to a company getting started on a content to the cloud journey right now? What should they be on the lookout for? What should they be prioritizing? What advice can you give?
Akim, with my experience and that of OpenText, I'll give one advice, but it's actually quite impactful and it's quite a big piece of advice if you think about it. One of the things that I see common is when we start the conversations of moving to the cloud is someone wanting to take exactly what they do today on premise, saying this is how we've always done it, this is how we do it, and we want it to work exactly like this when we're now on the cloud. This is a problem, Akim.
Why?
This is a big issue because you have a chance at this point to do a little bit of cleanup, to simplify, to truly have a frank conversation with your systems to check what does not really work or does not work efficiently. And now you've got typically a team of advisors who do this every day, here to tell you that globally, this is how a procure to pay process should typically work. So it's a chance for you to compare, it's a chance for you to have a refresh, it's a chance for you to declutter. Maybe simply put, it's a chance for you to simplify how you do things. So this for me would be the biggest tip if you're considering moving up from on-prem to the cloud.
It makes complete sense. It's a chance for you to do business better because that's ultimately what you are going to be achieving with the cloud. I mean, it's great chatting to you, Thabiso. I always love chatting to you, and I want to hear your closing thoughts on our discussion. And also, I'd like to ask you something as well. When you look at the pandemic and you look at how things have changed around us, you must be seeing some interesting examples from your clients that they are doing things right and incredible success stories. But what are your closing thoughts as we wrap up our conversation?
So Aki, I've got many examples. One of the typical ones is around signatures. It's a small thing, but it can actually cripple your entire business. Imagine you're unable to sign off orders, invoices, etc., because you used to do them physically. With cloud offerings nowadays, I'm not going to mention names, there's many signature solutions. We as OpenText provide some of these in particular. We saw an influx of these come up when the pandemic started, where someone was saying, something as simple as signing documents is a problem for me. So we were helping organizations with signing documents, and that was something that you could spin up yourself, consume as a service. It's something like downloading an app on your cell phone and suddenly you're able to sign documents, but you're doing this for business applications. Just that simple. So that's a good example that I can think of. And in my closing statements, Aki, is there's many examples that we have experiences across multi industries, large, small, medium size, etc., that would love to share with the audience from My Broadband. So I'd like to invite them to come spend time with us at OpenText. Let's share some thoughts and ideas, and let's see where that takes us. So for me, I look forward for those shared experiences. And thank you very much, Aki. It's always a pleasure coming to visit you and having a chat with you on My Broadband and talking to your audience.
Likewise, Thabiso, and very exciting times, and that's a great closing, thought there. Open the conversation, start having the conversation, because that's part of the journey to the cloud is discussing what your needs are, and the experts at OpenText, for example, will help you along this journey and even introduce new technologies to you to add that agility. It must be a very exciting time for you guys, Thabiso, and actually the whole world as a whole. When you look at those hyperscalers, you touched on AWS and you touched on Azure, for example, but as a continent, you look at the amount of investment that's been made on data centers across the continent. This is it's going to be so exciting to see this cloud journey for really small businesses, people who haven't even gone along that journey at all, but that future is really exciting when you look at the investment that's happening on the continent.
I couldn't agree more. What the pandemic did for us in South Africa, in Africa, for me, is I feel like it really accelerated conversations that should have already been going, making sure that we are playing at an international level with regards to how we consume technology, with regards to how we just do business in general. And I really feel like COVID has been quite an accelerator for us in that regard. And for that, although it's brought a lot of pain, for that, I'd say we really are reaping some benefits from that, and it's truly exciting.
Wow, can't wait to chat to you again as we reflect back again as to where we are on that cloud journey. Thabiso Hlatshwayo, the Solutions Consulting Manager for Africa at OpenText. Such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us at this year's My Broadband Cloud Conference.
Thank you, Aki. Thanks to your audience. I look forward to the next session.
Thank you.